Hey guys, this will finish up our series on the disciples, Saul being the last one that was called. Saul called Paul. And in Acts 13:9 it says, let's see, Then Saul, who also is called Paul, filled with the Holy Ghost, set his eyes on him. Okay. He was from Tarsus. He was a tent maker. He was called after the ascension of Jesus. Paul was one of the most influential leaders of the early Christian church. He played a crucial role in spreading the gospel to the Gentiles during the first century, and his missionary journeys took him all throughout the Roman Empire. He is traditionally considered author of 13 to 14 books, and I've got some of those wrote down. Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus, and Philemon. Okay. But before he was known as a tireless champion of Christianity, Paul was actually known for persecuting Christians, for the persecution of Christians. The book of Acts tells us that Paul was even present at the death of the first Christian martyr, the stoning of Stephen. One of the most remarkable aspects of Paul's life is that as a young man, he was well known for persecuting Christians, but by the end of his life, he had endured significant persecution as a Christian. The book of Acts and Paul's own letters provide an account of how this dramatic change happened. And we're going to read out of the book of Acts, chapter 9, verses 1 through 9. Okay. And it says, Acts chapter 9, 1 through 9. And Saul, yet breathing out threatenings and slaughter against the disciples of the Lord, went unto the high priest and desired of him letters to Damascus, to the synagogues, that if he found any of this way, whether they were men or women, he might bring them bound unto Jerusalem. And as he journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly there shined round about him a light from heaven. And he fell to the earth, and heard a voice saying unto him, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And he said, Who art thou, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom thou persecutest. It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. And he, trembling and astonished, said, Lord, what wilt thou have me to do? And the Lord said unto him, Arise and go into the city, and it shall be told thee what thou must do. And the men which journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but seeing no man. And Saul rose from the earth, and when his eyes were opened, he saw no man. But they led him by hand and brought him into Damascus. And he was there 3 days without sight, and neither did eat nor drink. Okay. Now, let's see. Where are we? This famous encounter is referred to as the road to Damascus. On his way to round up some Christians as prisoners, Jesus stopped him dead in his tracks and crippled him with blindness. But while Paul now knew the true identity and power of the one he had been persecuting, he had yet to learn Jesus' grace and power to heal. And for that, he would need to meet a follower of Christ. And we're going to go back to our Bible and read Acts chapter 9 still yet, verses 10 through 19. Okay. And there was a certain disciple at Damascus named Ananias. And to him said the Lord in a vision, Ananias, and he said, Behold, I am here, Lord. And the Lord said unto him, Arise and go into the street which is called Straight, and inquire in the house of Judas for one called Saul of Tarsus, for behold, he prayeth, and hath seen a vision, a man named Ananias coming in and putting his hand on him, that he might receive his sight. Then Ananias answered, Lord, I have heard by many of this man how much evil he hath done to thy saints at Jerusalem. And here he hath authority from the chief priest to bind all that call on thy name. But the Lord said unto him, Go thy way, for he is a chosen vessel unto me, to bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel. For I will shew him how great things he must suffer for my name's sake. And Ananias went his way and entered into the house, and putting his hands on him, said, Brother Saul, the Lord, even Jesus, that appeared unto thee in the way as thou camest, hath sent me, and that thou mightest receive thy sight and be filled with the Holy Ghost. And immediately there fell from his eyes as it had been scales, as he received his sight forthwith, and arose and was baptized. And when he had received meat, he was strengthened. Then was Saul certain days with the disciples which were at Damascus. Okay. Paul spent the next few days with the very Christians he had come to capture, and he immediately began preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, to the confusion of Christians and Jews alike. It would take time for Paul's reputation as a Christian preacher to outgrow his reputation as a persecutor of Christians. The book of Acts records 3 missionary journeys that took Paul throughout Asia Minor, Cyprus, Greece, Macedonia, and Syria to bring the gospel to the Gentiles. Paul was shipwrecked, put in prison, an earthquake, saved the jailer from killing himself with a sword. There's so much about Paul that, we can study out, which we studied some of it out. And I'm going to go over Paul's shipwrecks here in a minute. Now, it didn't mention how Paul died, but it's believed he was martyred. Okay. On many of Paul's journeys, he traveled by boat. As you can imagine, boats probably weren't nearly as safe as they are now, especially on long voyages. In his second letter to the Corinthians, which was likely written before his final trip to Jerusalem, Paul says he was shipwrecked 3 times. In 2 Corinthians 11:25, it says, Thrice was I beaten with rods, once was I stoned, thrice I suffered shipwreck, a night and a day I have been in the deep. In Acts 27, it records a 4th shipwreck in more detail. So, Acts chapter 27. Okay. He was on the ship because they were sending him to, the storm. In Acts 27, it starts at chapter 27, verse 14 is where it starts. But not long after arose against it a tempest wind called Euroclydon. And when the ship was caught and could not bear up into the wind, we let her drive. And running under a certain island, which is called Clauda, we had much work to come by boat. Which when they had taken up, they used helps, undergirding the ship, and fearing lest they should fall into the quicksands, strake sail, and so were driven. And we being exceedingly tossed with a tempest, the next day they lightened the ship. And the 3rd day we cast out with our own hands the tackling of the ship. And when neither sun nor stars in many days appeared, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope that we should be saved was then taken away. But after long absence, Paul stood forth in the midst of them, and said, Sirs, ye should have hearkened unto me, and not have loosed from Crete, and to have gained this harm and loss. And now I exhort you to be of good cheer, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship. For there stood by me this night the angel of God, whose I am, and whom I serve, saying, Fear not, Paul, thou must be brought before Caesar, and lo, God hath given thee all them that sail with thee. Wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer, for I believe God, and it shall be even as it was told me. Howbeit we must be cast upon a certain island. But when the 14th night was come, as we were driven up and down in Adria. About midnight the shipmen deemed that they drew near to some country, and sounded and found it 20 fathoms, and when they had gone a little further they sounded again and found it 15 fathoms. Then, fearing lest we should have fallen upon rocks, they cast 4 anchors out of the stern, and wished for the day. And the shipmen were about to flee out of the ship when they had let down the boat into the sea, under color as they would have cast anchors out of the foreship. Paul said of the centurion and to the soldiers, except these abide in the ship, ye cannot be saved. Then the soldiers cut off the ropes of the boat and let her fall off. And while the day was coming on, Paul besought them all to take meat, saying, This is the 14th day that ye have tarried and continue fasting, having taken nothing. So none of them had eaten 14 days. Wherefore I pray you take some meat, for this is for your health. For there shall not an hair fall from the head of any of you. And when he had thus spoken, he took bread and gave thanks to God in presence of them all. And when he had broken it, he began to eat. Then were they all of good cheer, and they also took some meat. And we were in all in the ship 216 souls. And when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship and cast out the wheat into the sea. And when it was day, they knew not the land, but they discovered a certain creek with a shore, into the which they were minded, if it were possible, to thrust in the ship. And when they had taken up the anchors, they committed themselves unto the sea, and loosed the rudder bands, and hoisted up the mainsail to the wind, and made toward shore. And falling into a place where two seas met, they ran the ship aground, and the fore part stuck fast and remained unmovable, but the hinder part was broken with the violence of the waves. And the soldiers' counsel was to kill the prisoner, lest any of them could swim out and escape. But the centurion, willing to save Paul, kept them from their purpose, and commanded that they which could swim should cast themselves first into the sea and get to land, and the rest, some on boards and some on broken pieces of the ship. And so it came to pass that they escaped all safe to land. Okay. I was looking in the notes here. This Bible gives some notes on this stuff. It says, it is no wonder morale is low. Imagine being at sea with 275 other people and being tossed by ferocious weather for 2 weeks with no control over where you are going. It is enough to drive seasoned sailors to despair. When they realize they are coming upon land still with no control, some pray for daylight while others try to sneak away in a lifeboat. Paul sees what is going on and alerts the centurion, and the soldiers scuttle the lifeboat. The crew's plan was to run the ship under the shore, but they hit an unseen sandbar. As a result, the bow is stuck fast in the sand while the stern is smashed into pieces by the pounding waves. The centurion instructs those who can swim to make their way to shore first. The others find pieces of battered ship and use them to float to shore. And just as Paul had promised, everyone arrived safely to land. Okay. So on Paul's way to trial in Rome, his boat encounters a brutal storm in dangerous waters. The soldiers took drastic measures, but an angel spoke to Paul, and he encouraged and advised them along the way, which we just read. I think I read about the angel. It's bad. I just read something and can't remember. Hold on. Give me a minute. Now next week we will do our final lesson on Paul, and that will lead us into December, which I have some plans for. I'm so excited. But I will tell you all next week what we will be doing for the month of December. Yeah, we read about the storm. I was seeing. I know I read it. I believe I read it. Uh, I'm sorry, you guys. Yeah, in verse 23, for there stood by me this night the angel of God, whose I am and whom I serve. I thought I'd read it, but yeah, I start listening to myself and believe what I say. Like I said, next week we'll finish up on Paul, and then I will go over with you all what we're going to be doing in December. You all have a good week. Have a safe week. Happy Thanksgiving. I love each and every one of you, and I will see you next week with our video. Love y'all. Bye.